Hello, so today we are going to, well, this whole week actually is going to be mini notation week. Um, so the mini notation is the part of Tidal that is for sequencing. So for making rhythms, there's really two parts of Tidal: the mini notation for making rhythms, for sequencing, and the functions which transform those sequences in different ways and combine them together and shift them and mess them up. So for the basic sequencing, we use mini notation, but I say basic, it actually gets pretty deep. So it'll take us quite a while to go through it all. In this video, I'll start scratching the surface of sequencing, but then later on, we'll start looking at how to make embedded structures and how to really mess with time signatures and things like this. But yeah, let's get out of this warehouse and into the code. So you can see here I am. To recap, to make a sound, we do this D1, then this mysterious dollar, and then we start with our sound pattern. So this is the mini notation. Whenever you see speech marks, double quotes, that means that a mini notation language is there. It's like a language within Tidal in a way. Tidal is a language inside Haskell, and the mini notation is a language inside Tidal. It's turtles all the way down, as they say. So let's try putting in some sounds here. So hopefully you have kick and snare by now. Oops, I didn't quite manage to put that in the right place. So these are what came in that extra samples pack that I shared in the previous video. So hopefully when you run this, you should hear a kick and a snare. And oh, I pressed the wrong button there. Yes, let's hush that. And you'll remember from the earlier video about the basic Tidal interaction, how we start sort of drop in a pattern into this D1 here, like this, and then we can use hush to stop it. And we can actually have other patterns going on as well, like a clap. We can start both, and then I can silence one of them. So these patterns, the cycles are running all the time, and we're just sort of dropping patterns into those different D1 and D2 and so on connections. Right, so this mini notation, this is quite easy to understand. It plays a kick, then a snare, and then it loops. So that's what we call a cycle, a cyclic loop. But the strange thing is that the more things we add, the faster they go. So the more and more I add, the faster it goes. This is a little bit unusual. Usually in traditional computer sequences, which are also called digital audio workstations, or DAW for short, the beat is like a constant. It's kind of the one constant thing. So if you added an extra beat to something, it would just add an extra bit of time. You end up with a longer sequence. But with this, the cycle is always the same length, at least the reference point for it. So the more things I add, the more it squashes them so that they fit that cycle exactly. Which means that if I have this one playing at the same time, you can just about hear, that's the start, and you can hear the kick and the snare, the kick and the clap happening at exactly the same time. So these two patterns are both take up one cycle. So that's an important thing. It's like the cycle's a constant. That doesn't mean that everything has to fit that cycle. There's lots of ways of stretching things so that they go outside that cycle and having things that change over time that we'll be looking at later on. One thing to note here is that sound and S mean the same thing. So that's just because if you're live coding, it's nice to type as few characters as possible. So if you put S, it just means exactly the same as sound. So if you see S, that is just short for sound. In general, I'll try and put sound just because it's a bit easier to read, at least when you're starting out. And the other thing is that something we've already covered in a previous video is that you can select different snare sounds. Remember that snare is actually a folder containing several samples, and here we're just picking different ones. So that's the third one because it starts counting at 0. That's the first one, and so on. And the other thing to remember is that you can just put the sound once, and then to the left-hand side of it, you can put your N pattern. So that is actually the same as doing this. You can see why that's a bit tedious to do. It won't work with N, I'll have to put sound here. But you hear no change when I run that. It sounds exactly the same. So this is fewer characters, which is always good in live coding. Right, so what else can we do in MIDI notation? Lots of stuff. First thing we can do is put a gap in, like if we, instead of that 5th or 6th kick, we just wanted empty step, then we could use this. So this is still a 4-step sequence, and this is just like a rest, a musical rest, or a bit of silence. Another thing we can do, which is really fun, is take a step and just make it a subsequence. So if we had this sequence of kicks, and I wanted this to actually happen twice in that same time, you can hear it's playing that twice. So it's still a 4-step sequence actually, but the 3rd step has 2 things squashed into it. And we can do that with this as well. Put 3 in there. Starts sounding a bit uneven because we're sort of breaking out of the normal for techno, the normal 4/4 tempo. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. So if I had 4 things against 3. Has a really nice unevenness to it. I like putting 4 against 3. What else can we do? We can also, in fact, take this step. So we've got 2 steps here, this step and then this step. This has a subsequence in it, and we can take this step within that and break it down even more. And just keep going. It starts going so fast that you can hardly hear. Yeah. Sounds like a sort of thrumming sort of sound. So that's where I'll stop for now. That's plenty. I'll make a little worksheet for you to go through. I'll base it on some workshops that I've done with Lucy Cheeseman, who I think will be popping up later on in this course. Yeah, just to step you through exploring sequencing and subsequencing. There'll be a lot more to come in this MIDI notation, but I think that's enough to get started. So yeah, thanks for listening and see you later.